one of the main things is that one of the main points for us all to hold in our heads through all of this is that private banks don't exist to serve you. They exist to maximize a profit, and they don't care what they do to get that profit. So we've all seen this, right? How many of you remember the 2008 crash, right? That you were just talking about? And after it, we were told that these banks are too big to fail. Remember? How did they get that big? They got that big by absorbing all of those neighborhood banks we used to have in our cities, right? The neighborhood banks that the woman who spoke earlier had her money in, safely, for decades, I'm sure. So now here we are where we have 8 big banks, and they own everything. And in the past 50 years, they have been the backbone of our economy. So they're right. If they collapsed, our economy would collapse. But the problem is that our economy and those big banks, they exist on our debt. They don't exist on our growth or our well-being or the planet's well-being. They exist on our debt. So how many of you here have debt, right? Student loans, medical debt, mortgages, credit cards, we all have debt. And these big banks, they love our debt. That's where their profit comes from. So they tell us that they're too big to fail. And when they almost crashed in 2008, when they destroyed our economy, we saw what a house of cards that they had created. And then they told us, we need you to help us sustain it. We need you to help us put it back together because there's no alternative. You guys are going to talk a little bit more about how.
Yeah, so we've established that private banks exist to maximize profit. So how is this done most easily? Well, through fraud, through exploitation of oppressed people, and other nefarious acts. Privatized prisons, financed by Wells, are profiting right now off centuries of institutionalized racism. The bank does not care that it funds oil pipelines that arrogantly barrel through over the objections of hundreds of native nations standing together. And this rejection of basic, decent values is nothing new. Wells Fargo arose in the 1800s, servicing the Western territories, which had been recently seized from native people. It profited enormously later on by seizing enslaved people as collateral on loans and mortgaged properties. This isn't something that most people know, but this was normal bank function. A century later, banks were instrumental in redlining, the practice of denying loans to entire black neighborhoods. So corporate America has been built on the backs of enslaved people, the genocide of Native American people, and the violation of Native American sovereignty. So therefore, what the business model of Wall Street is fraud and exploitation, and whatever else it needs to do to maximize profit. And let's be clear, Donald Trump is a symptom of this system. The system was like this way before he came around, but he's part of it. And in fact, his new Secretary of Transportation is on the board of Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo holds $1 billion of Trump's debt. So we can get an idea of who he's accountable to. Wells Fargo pretends it promises to change its ways. Since Wells Fargo was exposed for these 2 million fraudulent accounts in 2016, it's made some baby steps to try to improve its reputation. It's been refunding a couple million to customers, paying a couple million in fines, withholding a couple million from various executives. But we can't trust it when it apologizes. This is the inevitable result of a system that rewards banks for unchecked greed. And we also know that reforms imposed through external regulation can easily be rolled back, right? So Clinton repealed important banking regulation that was dated to the aftermath of the Great Recession. That's the Glass-Steagall Act. And now we're seeing Trump take aim at regulation that Obama put in place after the 2008 financial crisis. So where does this leave us then? So we can advocate, first of all, for the lower reach solution of nixing Wells Fargo from Philadelphia's approved banks, and then don't stop there. We can go to the higher reach solution of creating criteria that demand that banks have a certain level of social responsibility if they're going to be approved for the city. But ultimately, we need to point towards building a more deeply rooted, democratically controlled alternative, and that would be a public bank.
So you mentioned it earlier, and that is part of our goal here. So a public bank is not actually something new. It's something we're newly hearing about, perhaps. And it's something that different states are getting involved in. Washington State, New Jersey is interested in it. But actually, there is one public bank in the entire country, and it's been around for 100 years, stably. The Bank of North Dakota is a state-owned bank that has been operating at a growth for its entire existence. And it was started in 1919 because to save farmers from predatory loans. Well, we're all being preyed on, so we all need our own solution of this ilk.
Where's the nearest branch?
You can only, this is the thing about a state bank, it exists for its people. So this Bank of North Dakota exists for its people, so we need a Philadelphia State Bank to exist for its people. Citibank, yes.
Not Citibank.
Not Citibank with an I. So this bank in North Dakota, just to use it as an example, unfortunately we can't use it as a depository account, but it starts with its own state depository and uses its capital to offer low-interest student loans, low-interest mortgages, fund disaster relief, and invest in municipal renovation. So we're not actually as far away from that goal as you might think. Last fall, like Ariel mentioned, Cindy Bass proposed that we strike Wells Fargo from the city's depository account. And at the same time, it was also brought to the attention of City Council that it should research a city public bank. So these two ideas that we're aiming for are already floating around City Council. They just need the people power to push them into action, which is why we're all here today. So this coalition recently sent a letter to Councilwoman Cindy Bass, and we asked her to introduce legislation that would tie these two goals together. We offered a list of criteria that the city's depository bank would have to meet, and it included none of the horrendous actions that we've heard today. It said none of those would be acceptable for the city's public bank, or the city's depository bank. And then further, it asked that the city add to the acceptable depository accounts a public bank that the city would move forward to creating in the future, as that being the best possible end goal. And this idea of asking City Council to hold accountable the bank that is holding $3 billion of its dollars is not new. It's not idealist. The City Council has a long history of creating demands for criteria that the bank has to meet. And that includes, they weren't allowed to have banks that were tied to South Africa during apartheid. They also listed criteria for community involvement. And they weren't allowed to close branches more sudden than 90 days. So this list is already there. City Council is in the habit of saying these are the kind of banks that we want to work with, and we just need to remind them right now that it's great that they stood up against apartheid back in the 80s. We have local issues, local grievances against this bank that City Council needs to address, and we have community and like state, countrywide, like the no DAPL, that needs to be addressed, and they need to be censured, and they cannot be our bank. So here we are, and we have this legislation, this letter that we just sent Cindy Bass, asking her to put this legislation forward and to have a vote on it. And we know that Wells Fargo is a big bank, and we know that big banks have lobbyists, and we know that Wells Fargo lobbyists are in our City Council. So when we start to fight for this, Wells Fargo is going to push back, which is why we need your people power at City Hall on April 6th, when we have our lobby day, to demand this. They told us that they were too big to fail. In my perspective, they have failed. They have failed us. So it's time for us to stand up for what we want and meet them at April 6th at City Hall and say, this is what we want the city's depository bank to be. Yeah. All right?